Hi, everyone, and welcome to Perspectives, Edmentum's virtual event series where we gather educators and leaders from across the country about the topics that are top of mind for all of you right now. Today, we're talking about evaluating and streamlining Edtech resources. While these resources make virtual learning easier, navigating how they fit in with your district's ecosystem, understanding the pros and cons to them, and asking the right questions to make sure that implementing them is easy can be a challenging thing. My name is Emily Silverstein. I'm your host today. I'm the Vice President of Strategy and Impact here at Edmentum, and my work centers around helping to set and oversee the execution of Edmentum's multi-year strategic plan, integrating our acquisitions, and then also demonstrating the impact of our work on students and educators across the world. Effective technology and strong outcomes are really near and dear to my heart as a former school administrator. Before we dive in today, I want to encourage everyone to use the chat to get to know one another, and also use that Q&A box, please, on the bottom of your screen to submit questions to Erin and Paul. We'll get to as many of those as we can today. We'll make sure that we dedicate some time to it, but please do put those into the Q&A box. I might not see them in the chat box, but I'm sure to see them in the Q&A box. We'll also have a couple of poll questions pop up as we talk. Please take a moment to just answer those so we can get a feel of what's going on in your districts around the country, and we'll share answers back with the group too. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. I am delighted to welcome two experts with us today. They've both been working to address the technology ecosystem and to ensure schools take advantage of data interoperability. One of our panelists has approached this work by building a community of innovators, and the other by meeting the interoperability challenges for districts and school clients. As we begin, I'm going to invite each of them to share how their focus contributes to the conversation. So we'll start first with Erin Mote, co-founder and executive director of Project Unicorn, an amazing name of a project. Project Unicorn is an effort to improve data interoperability within K-12 education. So Erin, can you please tell our audience a little bit more about the project and why the initiative is so critical?
Thanks, Emily. First, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know that this is the busiest week of the year in terms of holiday parties. I had to carry in 4 sides of gingerbread houses this morning for my daughter, Claire. So no, everybody is managing a lot right now, joining us from schools and districts in this week, but also over the last couple of years. I just want to start by saying thank you, and thank you for joining us today. So Project Unicorn, it is a great name. It makes for great swag and really fun hashtags. But really, it's about making data magic. And interoperability is when data works together in a seamless, secure way that protects student privacy and ensures that the data that we're getting to educators gives you a picture of the whole child. And so Project Unicorn was started, if you can believe it, in 2016, which in education life is like, I think it's equivalent to dog years, right? So it would be 50 years old by now. No, it's only 7, but super excited that we have a coalition of 18 organizations on the steering committee, now close to 1,000 school districts, and over 250 edtech vendors who are really working at data interoperability in K-12. And Project Unicorn is focused on providing resources to the broader K-12 community. So this includes vendors and buyers, so folks in school districts and folks who use products. Those resources include what is data interoperability, how to get started on data interoperability, scholarships for district officials to learn more about data interoperability, attend conferences. And our work there is really to take something that sometimes feels like a really complex technical issue and make sure that it's broadly understood by parents, superintendents, curriculum directors, and tech directors, as well as on the vendor side, everyone from the CEO to the CPO to architects who are working or edtech startups. And so our focus is really about bringing understanding, motivating the market to work towards data interoperability, and thinking about how those issues intersect with remote learning, with navigating procurement to privacy and security for young people.
Thank you so much, Erin. That's really helpful to hear. Our other panelist is Paul Johansen, Edmentum's Chief Technology Officer, who was recently named one of Minnesota's Chief Information Officers of the Year. Congratulations, Paul. Edmentum software platforms support over 6 million students and hundreds of thousands of educators each year. Can you please tell us a little bit more about your role and speak to the criticality of ensuring platforms are available and reliably support our customer needs?
Yeah, so again, thank you everyone for taking the time to attend. Just like Erin said, we know it's an extremely busy time, so we really appreciate you joining us for a little bit for this important discussion. We're really excited to speak with you. So, right, as Chief Technology Officer at Edmentum, certainly the teams that we have lead up the development of our platforms that supports our digital curriculum and assessments. But I think most relevant to this conversation, we also lead up the security programs at Edmentum, the data privacy programs at Edmentum, all the pieces that go into achieving the goals that Erin was talking about, ensuring that we have secure transfer of data, ensuring that we have the right privacy parameters around that data, and being able to give our districts a high level of confidence that as they're trusting us as their district partner, they can rely on our products to be available at all times, right? That's part of the promise of being a partner with us, is that you don't have to burden your IT district or your IT staff in the district to be able to run the program. And that goes beyond just being available and being there, but also being secure and ensuring that we're aligning to the privacy needs of the district and any regulations that you have locally or at the state level or the federal level. And so it's really, an exciting team to be able to lead and a lot of fantastic challenges that we're working through.
I so wish that I had known both of you when I was running schools. I think things would have gone a lot more smoothly for me back then. So thank you both so much for sharing a little bit about your backgrounds. Let's do a quick check to see the background of those who are joining us in the audience today. A poll is going to pop up, and just would love for you to take a quick minute to answer that about your role. So which best describes you? Are you a CIO or CTO like Paul, a director of technology, a coordinator, a coach, something else? And while you vote, I just want to share a couple of points about how the technology landscape has changed in recent years. The first is that according to a report released by Learn Platform in August, the average number of tech products school districts access in a given month has almost tripled in the last several years, from around 550 during the 17-18 school year to over 1,400 in the 21-22 school year. And additionally, nearly 60% of educators surveyed by the EdWeek Research Center this summer said that teachers in their district adopted at least 3 new tools when vendors made them free at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, with nearly a quarter of those surveyed, around 23%, saying teachers tried more than 5 new tools. That's a lot. Coming back to what Erin said at the top of this, it's a busy time and everyone's been giving a lot, and boy, is that a lot of technology to add to the classroom in a short amount of time too. So let's look for a skinny minute back at the poll results. So with us, we have about a fifth of folks say that they are a chief information officer or chief technology officer. About a third are technology coaches, and half are in other roles. So great. Thank you so much for that. Really helpful to see and to know. So let's dive into some questions here. Erin, I'm going to start with you. So schools across the country have certainly embraced many more technology tools, as we've just shared, in supporting teaching and learning. And teachers were often finding ideas and sharing them with one another, some great collaboration that we saw over the last few years. They didn't really have to purchase that much because many education technology companies offer teachers free trials of their products along the way. And this was intended, of course, to help build schools, build their digital capacity. But a couple of questions here. Has this been too much of a good thing? And what are some of those challenges that are emerging now as a result?
Well, I think one positive thing coming out of COVID-19 and the pandemic, and frankly, like the huge appropriation of our ESSER funds, is how much we've seen advances in connectivity and technology. So the reality is there's probably nothing that could have closed sort of the digital access gap quite like what just happened in education. And I want to name that that's a big deal, and that more students today have access to technology in their classroom and access to device and access to connectivity than ever before. We still have work to do around equity, but definitely I think that's a positive thing. I'm an enterprise architect by training, so my next answer is how I'm going to answer it as sort of a technologist, and then I'm going to answer it as a school administrator. So one of the things you learn in enterprise architecture is that people adopt tools and solutions because a core system isn't working. And so they're going to add what we call a spoke technology. And so I think you saw a lot of educators trying to meet a very diverse set of needs for children in their classroom, their virtual classroom. And so they were trying tools in order to meet, again, just the diversity of needs that were existing in their virtual classroom. I think educators know how to do this in pedagogy and practice, what I would call in real life, right? So maybe they do station rotation or small group instruction. They were looking for tools that could model some of that pedagogy and practice. As an educator and administrator, there's too much tech. You can't have 1,400 tools in an enterprise system and ensure that they're interoperable, that they're doing the best work they can around privacy and security, and that you can manage those tools if you're a CIO or CTO. And so we need to find ways to think about how to evaluate the technology that exists in our ecosystems. Project Unicorn has developed a badge, for example, that lets folks know how interoperable a tool is in their ecosystem, with ranges from 1 to 4. Our colleagues at Digital Promise have done the same around research backed solutions. Our colleagues at Common Sense, all folks that are part of the Project Unicorn Steering Committee, trying to do the same thing in terms of privacy and security. And you're going to see other folks come together and try to offer more clear market signals about what works for whom and under what conditions, in a way to get information to educators so that they can make the very best set of decisions about what technology might work for their young people. But trying to manage a disconnected ecosystem of 1,400 tools that's doubling every year, that's almost impossible. And so I think we're going to see in the theme of this webinar a little of that tide coming back out, and folks having to make some hard choices about what works for whom and what meets the conditions that are set forward in their district. We definitely need to cull.
I like that headline. We definitely need to cull. So, in thinking about that and mentioning that technology ecosystem, Paul, can I ask you to just briefly define a school or district's technology ecosystem for the 50% of the folks who are joining us who are in other roles?
Sure. Yeah. From a technology ecosystem perspective, every district has a very complicated ecosystem. It may not look like it from the outside looking in, but it is extremely complicated. So even if you start with the foundational pieces, and a lot of what Erin mentioned, we've made great advances on in the last couple of years, is purely the infrastructure. What devices are we using? Is it Chromebooks? Is it iPads? Is it laptops? Making sure that the network infrastructure is there, making sure that students have connectivity at school, at home, and in other places. And so that alone is complicated. But then as you take and layer on the systems that it takes to run a district and ensure that students have access to the curriculum and the technology and the information that they need, the core heartbeat, of a school district is typically the student information system, right, which is going to have all the students' information. It's going to have the class schedules, where the students are attending. Typically the grade book lives there, or potentially in another place as well. There's also very often a learning management system, or an LMS, that is really for teachers and students and parents to be able to collaborate together and communicate and ensure that students have the right assignments, students can turn in their work. That's many times where students are taking assessments or other pieces. And then on top of those systems, this is where we talked about where there's a ton of great technology to support teachers and students and all the different pieces that they're trying to do. And so you think about all the other parts that are layered into that overall ecosystems. That's products like Edmentum's products in terms of curriculum and assessment, digital providers, it may be grade books, it may be communication tools, it may be parent communication tools, analytics tools, so districts again have that view of the whole child that we've mentioned before. And so when you start to think about that ecosystem and the complexity of ensuring that students that typically start in that student information system and the information that's there, how does that get to all the other systems? How do we make sure that it's in sync so that, the school as it's structured in the student information system is the same in a different system, and students are assigned to the right teachers and are assigned to the right curriculum? It's a very complicated piece of that ecosystem to ensure that that data is flowing to all those different systems, both in and out, right? The outcomes of what those students are producing is incredibly important for districts to be able to see that visibility. So that's where, when you start to get to the core of what we were trying to solve and what we're working on and so focused on from interoperability, it's thinking about the complexity for a district to manage all of these great tools that they have at their fingertips and ensure that data stays in sync and that that data is used securely with a high level of privacy to provide that fantastic insight that it can.
Great, thank you. So you spoke a little bit to this, that just you talked about the need to manage those technology resources. How can they do that?
Yeah, there's a number of different ways, and it's always a balance. I think whether you're in a school district, whether you're in a company, of finding that balance as a technology organization between being too heavy-handed and kind of
Mm,
stifling innovation, the ability to try new tools, but also being able to provide that right level of governance and structure to ensure that it's part of the plan. So typically you're going to see districts use a set of policies and an overall technology strategy to really guide how they're managing those technology resources, right? That's going to ensure that there's a guiding set of principles on how to
mm,
adopt technology. It should also, what's really important is that it aligns to the overall district vision, right? What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve as a district? What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve with that tool, and ensure that they're lining up? And then as part of the strategy, providing the right guidelines around security and data privacy, um, and also aspects that are critically important around how we're going to provide training, how we're going to provide support. Right? These tools don't just adopt themselves and start working, right? They require an effort and an understanding of all the users and stakeholders to be able to do that. And so typically that's managed right at the top level, again through this set of policies and a overall strategy that the district will have that helps guide consistency but still provides flexibility in building up and managing that overall ecosystem. And that makes it sound quite a bit easier than it probably is, but that's the top level structure.
You're talking to somebody who works on writing strategic plans and helping people execute them. So I know the complexity involved there, but you're speaking to somebody who really agrees. So
Yeah.
love a good plan around that. So you talked a little bit about this. Having this wide array of products can complicate professional development for teachers, parent outreach, learner experience for students. Gets to, Erin, what you're saying, like we need to condense this, having 1,400 products. Wow. How do you communicate and how do you ensure safety here? So what are some of those implications that poses for student data privacy, cybersecurity? What are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome to ensure that you're speaking the same language when it comes to virtual instruction, Paul?
Yeah, I think, from that perspective, it's absolutely critical to ensure student data is managed and
Mm,
secured well, right? Every provider that a district is looking at should have a privacy policy that is clear, easy to understand, publicly available, and that privacy policy should really be able to tell a lot of the information you need to know. What data the provider is going to be handling, how they're handling it, how long they will be holding on to it, ensuring that they have a security program in place. And so I think that's a first step, or one of the first steps, is ensuring that privacy policy. Now, the other great thing is that, as Erin talked about in her introduction to Project Unicorn, there are a lot of great organizations trying to
mm,
help create essentially shortcuts to be able to understand which providers are adhering to a set of standards that industry experts say are the right standards to hold to. So of course, Project Unicorn certifications, the badges that range from 1 to 4, give districts instant visibility into the ability to do that. The other areas that Erin mentioned other organizations too. One Edtech has a standard called Trusted Apps. That's another area. So there are a handful of really, really great organizations building sets of standards to ensure that it isn't the 100% on the burden of the district every time to kind of build their own checklist, go through it. That these certifications will really help narrow the field down to a set of organizations that you already know are aligned to the policies, best practice policies in the industries and the policies for your districts as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, getting those agreements in place and all of those pieces in place can be a bear, I'm sure, for all districts.
Yes.
Let's turn a little bit here now to some of the interoperability challenges, as we've touched on some of those. So we know that there can be a lot of challenges when we bring in a lot of tools into a district or into a school. And so want to just dig into, we have a poll, but I'm actually going to skip the poll on this and just dive right into the topic. So I'm going to try to define interoperability, and I'm going to do it a little differently than Erin did it. And see how our definitions match and probe that a little bit. So it's the capacity of two or more software applications to securely share information, or basically to talk to one another. So for education technology, the most important aspect of interoperability is the seamless connecting of student information. So Erin, going back to that definition there, do you agree with it? And tell us again how you define interoperability to others.
Yeah, I would just add 2 words, seamless and secure, because I think one of the things that's very important around interoperability is that applications talk to each other, but to everything Paul just said, that they talk to each other in a way that lives up to a district's obligations to their students, families, and their stakeholders around privacy and security. And also that there's the explicit expectation with vendors and service providers that they're helping the district maintain that privacy and security protections for young people. And so, I think I talk about interoperability as oftentimes the pipes, right? The way we move the data and the infrastructure that underpins so many of the great outcomes, which I call hot showers. So whether that's the data visualizations, the ability to see the picture of a student that includes not just what they're maybe doing in school time, but out of school time, how they might be integrating with an external provider like tutoring, understanding if they're taking the bus or walking to school, so why they're maybe late on snow days. We need to have the context around the environment that a student is operating in, and interoperability can really help us get that context and that full picture. So you're so close. If I could just add a carrot from my old days of grading papers, I don't know if you remember that little triangle symbol, and add and secure, I would take it in a minute.
Yeah, that's a good red pen addition for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't going to give you the red pen. I always graded with pink pens because I felt
I love that.
That was like a cheerful thing. Cheerful pink.
That's a much happier shape.
Right. Happier correction.
Scarred by the red pens of youth. Yeah.
So many of us are. So many of us are.
Paul, anything else that you would add to that definition?
I think the definition itself is fantastic, and certainly with Erin's additions, I agree to it. When I talk to people about interoperability, I tend to talk about it looking through 2 different lenses. Absolutely what Erin said around the data lens, right? How do you get this data in and out of each system to make sure that it's there, and more importantly, that you're building this kind of full visibility into a student and both the academic outcomes with the other aspects of it. That part is so important, because without that level of interoperability, you do miss out on kind of the big picture things, right? Of building this picture of the student. It can be prone to errors from a quality perspective, but more importantly, I think, and we believe at Edmentum, is the time that it takes teachers. We don't want teachers sitting there entering student names, retyping grades back into the grade book, giving teachers back that time to be able to spend it making meaningful connections with students, taking care of their own wellness, so they're not doing this in the middle of the night or on the weekend, is also a huge aspect. It's having really good seamless interoperability provides that ability for teachers to bring back time from a data perspective. The other lens I look through. Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was just going to say, like, one of our original things was giving teachers their Sundays back, right? Because when we
Yep.
started Project Unicorn, we would see these crazy spreadsheets of like, and macros that people would use in order to try to get those hot showers, right? To get that full picture. So I will endorse that one too. That was a good carrot pig pen on mine.
Yeah. And then I think, again, just reemphasizing the seamless part of it. I also think from an interoperability perspective, it comes down to an access and identity lens as well. Is it, does the platform integrate with single sign-on? Does it integrate with, do you have the ability to launch the curriculum you need to out of your LMS, for instance? So ensuring that those pieces are there, because the last thing in the world that a second grade teacher wants to be doing is running around the classroom, helping 30 students log into a new platform or a different platform when these students maybe already have a badge, they already know their username and password for the school. So those, what seem like small things, can be huge gains in terms of the focus time, the lack of kind of disruption that another tool may provide, of having that, again, just reinforcing that seamless word of having that seamless access and making it as easy as possible to get the students and teachers connected to the right resources at the right time.
Great. So, Paul, you just went into some of those benefits of interoperability. Erin, anything that you would add to that for the teachers, for school leaders, for district leaders, besides getting your Sundays back, which is a huge benefit for sure?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I see happen, I will say two things. When folks have a database conversation with parents, let's say in a teacher conference, and I've watched some of these things happen, it really shifts the dynamic to understanding and shared language. And it allows, parents to identify patterns, teachers to identify patterns. So, like, did you know your students 20 minutes late every Thursday? What's happening on Thursday morning? Oh, they're taking their sibling to school or dropping them off first, or we're doing something about the bus route. It just like strengthens the type of conversation and relationship you can have with parents. And I think the same thing with students. When students know, own, and embrace their own data, they are capable of far more than we give them credit for. And so when I was an educator and working in schools, I remember when we would, and sixth grade was our entry grade, we used to have this conversation with our sixth graders about where they were at relative to reading proficiency. And many of them were 2, 3, sometimes 4 grade levels behind in their fall assessment. And they had never heard that. They had never known where they were. They were just, being moved on into a grade. So they felt like they were reading at a 6th grade level. And the reality is they weren't. But when they knew that, they were able to sort of take charge, and they worked harder and more directed and had more academic gains than I'd ever seen, because they were empowered with their own data. They were agents of their own learning. And that is super powerful. And likewise, I see when superintendents really embrace data interoperability and data governance that goes alongside of that, they're able to ask and inquire about some really hard questions around equity. I was just at the EdFi Summit and presented with one of our school districts that we've been working with through a cohort of Digital Promise. One of the things they started looking at is teacher recommendations into AP classes and into classes that are, honor level classes. And they began to present data to teachers and to decision makers about where that student was across the whole spectrum of engagement and where they were thinking about classes. And it made a huge change in how the educator might perceive them as a student and address some inherent bias, but also in the diversity of the young people that were gaining access to AP classes and to AP curriculum. And it was really just having a data-based conversation, not being accusatory, but saying, like, here's the data. What are we learning from this? What can we interrogate about this? Is this aligned to our mission, vision, and values? It really can shift the dynamic to be more relationship focused and to have the conversation really sometimes go from what might feel like an adversarial conversation into one that's really centered in shared mission, vision, and values.
Yeah, that data-driven conversation, so important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, from a publisher perspective, what are districts and schools' requirements for interoperability, and how do you address them in your solutions?
Yeah, I think the requirements that we typically see can probably be bucketed into three different areas. And there are areas we've already talked about. But the first is data exchange, right? How do you
Mm,
securely move that
mm,
data between different systems within the district's ecosystem? The second, again, is identity and single sign-on, right? How are students going to securely get logged into that system and ensure that they have access to the right areas? And then the third part is integration between two systems. And most often that's, again, going to be how do you get curriculum to maybe launch out of an LMS or another tool seamlessly? And so really when we see um, requirements for integrations or interoperability from districts, it typically comes in those areas from a publisher perspective. And to be able to accomplish that, we use a variety of methods. Where possible and where it's a great fit for the district and the need, we'll use a standard. There's a lot of standards in education, it might be EdFi that Erin just mentioned. LTI is a popular standard that's used with LMS systems, but standards don't solve every problem. And oftentimes standards can only go as far as a standard can go
mm,
to meet kind of that common denominator. And so you can't just rely on standards to be able to do it as well. There's a lot of other industry best practices and other pieces. And I think that's where the difference between a standards-based certification has a lot of value, but a certification or a badge credential like Project Unicorn is also taking into account not only how you might be achieving those things through a specific standard, but really best practices and the type of practices that need to be in place. Again, because there are a lot of different ways to solve these problems, and the standard may not be the only way. And then it's also understanding what are the important partners that a district relies on. It could be, Google single sign-on, or Clever is another important
mm.
provider for many of our districts. ClassLink. There's a lot of providers, and so having connections and working with those providers, whether they're based on an industry standard or not, is also really important to solve those interoperability needs for the district as well.
Yeah. And Paul, how can solving for those needs, how does data interoperability provide districts and schools with better information to innovate in instructional practices?
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit about that already, but having that data and the interoperability again allows that holistic view of what's happening with the student, what's happening in a classroom, getting that perspective of being able to understand all of the different pieces. So
Mm,
having that data in one place is really important. And unfortunately, many edtech ecosystems kind of sit off or edtech products themselves sit off in an island that are kind of separated from the district ecosystem. So many times that data is sort of trapped and isn't brought back into the ecosystem where it can
mm,
provide this value. So if you have that interoperability, again, it goes back to what Erin was saying. You can have a
yeah.
data based conversation about where a student's at and really open your perspectives for how you might best serve that student or that population of students that you're really focused on serving.
Yeah, it sounds like it can also help you elevate and figure out where you have issues that you might not have even known that you had,
Yeah,
or something that, you might think you have one issue, but this allows you to really see the true issue that you have. Might not be what you thought it was.
yeah. I mean, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? And it
Yeah,
helps surface that.
yeah.
If I could chime in there, I would also say,
Please.
like, I think one of the things that we're starting to see is that districts who have interoperability in place and who have made, a concerted effort to work at interoperability actually have less applications in their ecosystem. Exactly to Paul's point, because they're able to bring the data together, right? They
Mhm.
don't need like a bespoke application over here, bespoke application over there. They're like, oh, this data exists. We just have to be able to get it out. And so I actually think when we talk about calling tools or making tools more efficient or understanding what's working for whom and in what context, interoperability can be a key solution to that decision set that you need to make around, is this something we need in our ecosystem? Is this something we need to manage? is this something that needs to be there? And I couldn't agree more with Paul that, this is a big evolution of the rubric. The Project Unicorn sort of rubric over the last year or so has evolved to not just be about standards, but also about some of the tools and systems that have happened with the market evolving that exist outside of standards. And standards should lag innovation, right? Because you don't need, once innovation is no longer innovation, it needs to be standardized. And so, if you're working at personalized learning, if you're working at, more learner-centric models, you're going to see that you might have to use not just standards, but some of these other tools and systems in order to achieve that ecosystem interoperability.
Such a good point. Yeah. So I'm going to pause here and ask another question of our audience. So we're going to put up a poll here. Please share to what degree you agree with this statement. EdTech leaders should confirm that tech tools can easily be integrated with other applications before they approve it for district funding or individual teacher use. So we know that most districts have their own set of rules and procedures for deciding which ed tech products to allow teachers to use, to which ones to buy district-wide licenses for, and which to prohibit entirely. Increasingly, interoperability is part of that conversation. So let's look at how important you all see that. I'm not entirely surprised by these results. What I see is everybody thinks, either agrees or strongly agrees. About 40% of respondents strongly agreed with the statement, and the rest agree with it. So it feels like we're sort of on the same page about the importance of that. So the ability of different education software packages to communicate seamlessly is not an abstract technical standard. Interoperability significantly increases the value that educators, students, parents, school systems, the community gain from EdTech applications. So, Erin, can you please speak a little bit more about how interoperability increases the value from programs, from EdTech applications?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that generally folks who score higher in interoperability in the State of the Sector report score higher in privacy and security. And so generally understanding of an adoption of interoperability leads to better privacy and security practices within a district. And that's been something that we've proven out in the State of the Sector report for 2 years in a row, that there's a high correlation between these two pieces in an EdTech ecosystem. And so, cybersecurity, according to the COSIN survey that just came out from district leaders, is folks' number one concern. Number two is interoperability. And so seeing those two can continue to be tied together, I think is it just indicative of lived and learned experience. I also see, folks who embrace interoperability in the vendor space tend to have, frankly, stronger relationships with their district customers because they're paying attention to those requirements and what's going on. We generally see folks who are scoring higher on the Project Unicorn rubric have a better ability to integrate with the tools in those ecosystems. Those tools tend to stay longer in districts. For startups who are embracing interoperability, we actually have some great new data which shows a higher acquisition price for those startups, which is great. That's great for our EdTech startup founders. Those who are prioritizing interoperability see these benefits over the long term. We have this great resource at Project Unicorn. It's our most downloaded document ever in Project Unicorn's history, which makes me so happy. It's called Because They Were Ready. And it's the story of 4 districts who were prioritizing interoperability before the COVID-19 pandemic. And in their own words, they share with how that focus on interoperability made them ready to take on what was an unprecedented interruption in learning in their districts. And whether that was being able to leverage single sign-on, or it was being able to understand who had access to devices and connectivity faster, we know that if, Mote and sort of interrupted learning happens, folks who focus on data interoperability are just much more ready to meet those challenges. And so I think of it as, and Emily, this will speak to you, a little bit of strategic planning. If you're focusing on data interoperability, you're ready for what happens. And while your kids in your district might not love that they no longer have snow days, it does mean that you have ways to meet a diversity of student needs when you need to, when students, you know, have a tragedy in their life, break their leg, you know, something like that, you can actually have learning keep going. And so learning uninterrupted is, again, one of those huge benefits of data interoperability and a mature data ecosystem in a district.
Great, thank you. I'm absolutely for that. And I know that's a controversial opinion about snow days and the end of snow days, or what might happen with them. So Paul, speaking from a snowy Minneapolis area, what are some of the considerations that school systems should weigh as they consider EdTech investments?
Oops, sorry, I was on mute. Really, you know, I think, again, reinforcing it, and Erin had a great data point, right, that it was number one in the list, is really thinking about cybersecurity and how important that is. You know, it's incredibly important, but it's hard to measure. You know, and that's where, again, certifications such as Project Unicorn or Trusted Apps and others are really good indicators. Again, using that privacy policy to ensure that the provider, the vendor, is attesting to having a strong security program is really important. You know, I think other important questions as you're thinking through it from a technology perspective, right? Is it going to meet state privacy laws, which are constantly changing and evolving? So getting a good assurance there. Does it have the important features that might help students with particular learning needs, like closed captioning, text-to-speech, those sorts of areas? Does it mesh with the district's approach to a particular subject or a topic is really important. Again, we're not implementing these tools for the sake of implementing technology. We're implementing these tools to try to get to a specific outcome. So ensuring it's aligning with the pedagogy, the curriculum needs of the districts. And then really, again, kind of coming back to those very basics of the ecosystem. Is it going to work with the district's hardware and software, and ensuring that it's meeting, you know, minimum requirements, that it's fully supported on the devices that have been deployed to students and to teachers as well.
Yeah, as somebody who just booted up an iPad from, as it turns out, I think it was like a 12-year-old iPad, realizing it's just no good for anything anymore. That you're speaking to me right now. So. Yes. So let's talk a little bit more about Project Unicorn's certification program. So Erin, can you please tell us a little bit more about the interoperability certification program as a whole?
Yeah, I'm really excited about the work that we're doing around certification for EdTech vendors. So this is for EdTech vendors. It's not for school districts. School districts can sign a pledge and gain access to a ton of materials, including the scholarships I mentioned. But this certification is really for EdTech vendors. And what we do is we look across different dimensions of data interoperability, recognizing that tools are at different places. So we look at things like, what's the level of data you can get out? How do you, of a tool, how does the data come in? How does it come out? We're about to introduce cost. Does it cost a district to get their data out in an interoperable way? How transparent are vendors about those costs? And it considers not just standards, but a range of ways that folks can achieve interoperability. I think one of the things that's really unique about the Project Unicorn certification process, and we're working with Digital Promise right now actually to implement this into their micro-credentialing platform. So what's really exciting about this work is not only does it appreciate that folks are at different levels, so 1 to 4, but in order to earn the certification, you have to prove to us that it's working with a district partner. So sometimes with certifications, you can just say that it works, particularly it's abstract. It's sort of an idea. But at Project Unicorn, you got to put your money where your mouth is, and you got to show us that it's working. Either our team of technical experts can look at backend data and code, or you can we can partner up with a school and district-based partner and watch the data actually move real time with the right types of privacy protections in place. And so we're making sure that the statements that vendors might be making about the level of interoperability of their tool are verifiable and actually work in the wild, as I say. The other thing that I think is really important about the Project Unicorn certification is that we're making sure that it goes to places where folks are making decisions, or what I call point of sale, about EdTech tools. So you'll see the Project Unicorn certification and whether or not a vendor has signed the Project Unicorn pledge in places like Google Marketplace, in Clever Marketplace, in the Learn platform, now in the ISTE product index. And so we don't want you to go have to search our website to figure out if a tool has earned the certification or not. If you want to learn what's like level 3 mean and what does it look like, come to our website. But if you want to see if they have that badge and at what level, we want to make that as easy as possible for folks who are decision makers in that work. The other thing I'll say is Project Unicorn has a model procurement library. So if you're thinking about writing interoperability into your procurements and into EdTech language, go check out that procurement and RFP library where you can actually see how other districts do it. It's one thing I love about the Project Unicorn community. These unicorns love to share. And so they're willing to post their RFPs, show you what they've done, actually share like what didn't work out. Like the verification thing is something we learned from lived experience. And so the certification program is really about creating clear market signals for our district partners and for our state partners about where tools are.
Yeah, that's terrific. And that ability to just learn from the mistakes of others and experiences of others is just a really powerful time-saving, money-saving, project-saving ability too. So.
Giving EdTech directors their Sundays back. Maybe you should be that
slogan. Love that tagline. That's great. That's great. And so, Paul, earlier this year, Edmentum achieved Project Unicorn's Tier 4 interoperability certification, which is the highest level possible available. So can you tell us just a little bit about your experience with that process?
Yeah, for sure. So, as a person that's been working in this space for over a decade and is super passionate about interoperability and what we do from an EdTech perspective, one of the things I feel most fortunate about with Edmentum is the full support that we have for moving interoperability forward, for ensuring that we're at the forefront. And so, we're very lucky to have a dedicated team that's all they do is focus on that. We have a technical product management team that just focuses on our interoperability. There's buy-in across the entire executive team of the importance and criticality of this. And I think as we approached achieving the Tier 4 certification, I think that really shone through for us in terms of our ability to be able to do that. I think for us, a lot of people will look at interoperability and say that, hey, this is a technical problem. It's something that's led by the technology team, and that's certainly the case. But what I think we found interesting achieving the Tier 4 interoperability standard was it wasn't just a technical team doing it. Like we talked about with standards, sometimes you have a technical team that's just kind of proving something out and checking a box. It took collaboration between our team, between our product management team, our legal team was involved, our privacy team was involved, our marketing team was involved. It was really a cross-functional effort. And again, I think that speaks to the robustness and probably what differentiates Project Unicorn from some of the other standards out there is that like it's legit, right? You have to work for it. You have to collaborate with people on the other side to ensure that you're approaching the different aspects of the rubric correctly, that you're understanding them, and again, proving it, that in the wild that it's working as well. And so I think that's part. And so it's also a part that's different is there is a level of collaboration expected. So you're not just trying to figure it out, working with the Project Unicorn team. Getting through that, getting the right guidance is also a big part of it. So it was a collaborative effort to work through that process as well.
Great, fantastic. So before we head to questions and answers, I'm going to do one more poll. We've talked about the flood of available resources and the volume that have entered the classroom over the last few years in particular. So I'm curious to gauge how people are feeling about all of that. So here's our final poll for today. How do you feel these days about learning how to use new ed tech tools? Are you on the scale from very reluctant to very eager? So give everyone just a moment to answer that. To be honest, at the end of the semester here. So what we have in our results, we have 2/3 of respondents are saying they are somewhat eager and 1/3 very eager, which is great to hear, especially with interoperability. So we often think of interoperability in the context of data and technology, but many also say that interoperability should enable technology providers, school systems, educators, students to remain focused on improving student outcomes. So Erin, do you agree with that statement? And can you tell us a little bit more about, what this looks like to you?
I mean, at the end, that's what we're all here for, right? Like I'm in education, not just because I'm a mom to Robert and Claire, but because I can see the immense potential of what education can do for young people. And I think we all share this belief that it shouldn't be driven by the zip code you're born into, the opportunity and impact you have in your life. And I talked a little bit about, the power of giving students their own data. I think we're also understanding more and more as we learn about the science of learning and development that all learning is jagged. We all learn differently. And if we're going to really think about this desire to have learner-centric models, more personalized learning, the ability to meet students where they are, the ability, frankly, to address gaps in instructional time caused by COVID-19, we're going to have to understand where to target our time, our energy, and our interventions. And in that case, sometimes think about, where we deploy acceleration or where we need new tools or where we need more support. And so students need to be at the center of everything we do and everything we're working towards. We need the data infrastructure to support better student outcomes. We need the data infrastructure to support our educators. I think interoperability, again, is the pipes that get us to those hot showers of student outcomes.
Great. And as we are asking these final questions, if you all have questions, the audience, if you have questions, please put them in our question and answer chat box so we can get to them here in a moment. Paul, while you're doing that, Paul, how does interoperability support the purpose of schools from your perspective? How does data provide schools and educators with a holistic picture of the student?
Yeah, I think simply put, it just makes things easier, right? It's easier for students and teachers to use the products, easier to ensure the solutions are secure and the data is kept private, like we've spoken about several times. It's, ensuring that the time spent focused on academic outcomes and not on learning the tool, right? That's what it really comes down to for me in terms of the goal and what it does and how that helps provide that best picture around the student.
Great. One final question for both of you. Anything else to add about how this work might relate to digital equity and accessibility for all students?
Go ahead.
Do you want to go first? Okay.
No, go.
I'm really excited that we are working right now on accessibility and usability with CAST through one of our other alliances at Innovate EDU, the Educating All Learners Alliance, and they are trialing right now a badge for universal design for learning. So same kind of philosophy of certification. How do we give these clear market signals around the most inclusive and accessible tools? And I think the other thing that interoperability can help folks understand is from an equity perspective and from an accessibility perspective, if you can not just take attendance, but understand how students are engaging with a tool, you can understand, again, whether that, to the theme of this webinar, whether or not that tool should be in your ecosystem. And interoperability around usage data can really help you make some decisions about whether students are authentically engaging with that tool and whether students are even able to access the content that you're putting in that tool. And so this inquiry, I think that districts have to make around, is the digital ecosystem we're creating interoperable, accessible, and inclusive? That's really the big one, and private and secure. So if you can hit those, you're doing right by kids.
Great.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously 100% agree. Maybe a couple things that I would layer on top is certainly, I also think it supports personalized learning and personalized decision making. We've talked a little bit about that, but when you think about, the equity and accessibility for all students, is ensuring that we're not teaching to the middle or just teaching to a common standard, right? That
Mhm.
these tools, when implemented right and when provided with the right context, can help a teacher make those better connections, can help a teacher better understand what a specific student needs based on all of the circumstances that they're going through. And so I think just kind of re-emphasizing the personalization that it helps. And again, not replacing the teacher in terms of that personalization, but being able to provide additional data, additional context for all the stakeholders involved in a student's life to be able to best help move that student forward with their academic outcomes they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Helping students to achieve in life, definitely the name of the game on all of this. So.
Yes.
So I'm not seeing any questions in the question and answer box. So I do want to say just a huge and tremendous thank you to Erin and Paul, and to all of you who came to join us today to get a little perspective, especially during this last huge push before the end of the school year for so many districts for the calendar year. If you want more information about Project Unicorn or about Edmentum and our interoperability solutions, we'd be happy to help you out. So please do reach out. And as you leave the Zoom space today, there'll be a brief survey that I just want to pull your attention to. Leave your email address there and somebody will be in touch with you shortly. Thank you all so much for being here today. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.